Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum. My name is Citizen Strife, and this week I'm going to be talking about a show that I would say caught me a little by surprise, because it's not always the sort of show I'm going for, but I watched it near the end of last year, and I was really absorbed by it, for the most part, and that was 86, codename 86. So they have both the number and the name listed out there. But 86 debuted a couple of years ago. I believe at the time it was one of the more popular shows of that season, whether it was 2022, 2021, somewhere around there. And for me, watching it, what really struck out to me was the two main characters and how their upbringings and then their conversations with each other really ended up enhancing the material and making it as important a show as it was. Because by and large, I'm not really into war shows. I would say stuff like sports anime. Like, I'm a sports guy, but I don't really like watching sports dramas and anime dramas and junk. Mech shows as well. And this is kind of a pseudo mech show, though it's more war-based than anything. So I'm coming to this from the aspect of, not always my thing, but the characters of these things are always going to be my draw if I'm going to like a thing. And it turns out the two main characters and the things that they both go through in different ways are kind of what hold this together. And the setup is pretty simple. You have a well-off, well-to-do society known as San Magnolia. I'm going to make sure I get that right. San Magnolia. A bunch of people, I forget if they're like genetically engineered to look the same or built the same way. Basically, there are a lot of like just albino, just straight white hair people, and they live in this like well-to-do society. And as far as they know, they are fighting a different, with the Republic or Empire. They're at war, and the way the war tends to get run are with these things known as juggernauts. And for their part, they don't think that the juggernauts are real people, because they have what are known as handlers. So people of San Magnolia, and I'm imagining other places, have this commanding officer essentially see things through their perspective, and they experience what the juggernauts are going through. So it's kind of a weird system where they're commanding the juggernauts, but they're also kind of sensing the battle even though they're way far away. So it's like a secondhand experience of war and its effects through the guise of other people. What the show tells you after a while, and they don't hide it, is that the juggernauts are piloted by real people. And in this case, they're piloted, the 86 are kind of this ragtag group of people that are left pretty much to die. They don't have a place in society. They're just left on this army base, and they're fighting the war, and everybody is just happy-go-lucky or unaware of their shit. And only that top-level people really deal with it. So they're the ones that have to deal with the trouble, and their handlers have all been kind of like, yeah, this is stupid, I can't handle this anymore. It's kind of a shit situation. Because a lot of them end up dead. But it's one of those, I think they called it the bloodless war effect, the idea that they're trying to mirror the idea that if nobody's really dying, that no real, like, you're trying to have blood off your hands so that there's less of a human element involved. But it turns out, again, not to be real. And that's where one of the main characters ends up dealing with it. So, again, I talked about two main characters, and you're shown the show. And then the first main character is Shine Nozen. He goes by the nickname The Undertaker. And he was voiced by the late Billy Kametz. And Alex Lee at the tail end of it. So basically what happened was Billy Kametz was in stuff like Persona 5 Royal and Konosuba on occasion and some other shows. He was now Naofumi in the first episode of, or the first season of Shield Hero back when it didn't suck balls. And he had a really good sense of gravitas, but unfortunately, as young as he was only 35 at the time, he suffered from cancer and passed away as most of his roles were wrapping up. And it was kind of a sad situation. So yeah, cancer sucks. But in this, Kametz plays the Undertaker, this commanding officer of this squadron of people in the Spearhead Squadron, the sense that these people have nowhere to go, nothing to do, and can't really function in other places. They're left to just fight or die. And you spend a lot of time with them and see them and, you know, their struggles. And the Undertaker has to deal with the fact that sort of disillusionment and a jaded perspective. He's just kind of there, stuck in this limbo. And when people die, and he has to deal with the guilt. And he does that by taking parts of the juggernauts that have been, of the characters who pass away and get killed. And he just has a collection. And the prevailing thought is that anytime anybody is with him, somebody on his squadron dies, which is why they're so notorious. On the other end, you have Elaina Melize, otherwise known as Lena. She's voiced by Susie Young, who's Yuffie in the new Final Fantasy VII games, and she's recently in Yakuza or Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. So she's played as one of those characters in San Magnolia, the well-off, well-to-do, nothing-to-see-here people that are oblivious to all the fighting going outside. She wants to be a handler for the 86, because that's what her father was. He was a military officer, and she is always confronted with her friend, and the kind of her interaction with the plot is not only the handler parts where she analyzes the fights and tells the people, okay, here's the best method of how to deal with the armored enemies and shit. She has to deal with this with a friend of hers always saying, don't be doing this. You could be working with me as friends on research and having a little fun and whatnot. And Lena always just ignores it. She says, I'm going to do what I'm going to do because I want to do it, and it becomes a source of drama. And the drama in the show is what really carries it, because there isn't a lot of comedy to be had. And thank God, because it's like a 75-25, if that, in terms of drama to comedy. I would say even further drama as well. But one of the drawbacks, I think, with this 86 idea is that you don't see the antagonists, more so the nameless, faceless goons that just fight. I've always been a fan of the war shows like Space Battleship Yamato or Last Exile, which I saw as well, was where you have the protagonist that you're following, but you're also following the antagonists every so often, and you get sort of a humanizing element to them, and it doesn't feel like just somebody fighting for war or world domination. You can see my point. This show seemed content to focusing in on Lena and Undertaker, which is fine because they do well enough, but I do think that that is a missing piece that could have been explored a bit more. But what is there is good, because Lena, her involvement in the plot tends to be with these regular check-ins, like mental health check-ins with the squadron. Once she figures out that it's real people and doing real things, she wants to help as best she can in whatever scenario she can. So she, turns the military upside down and starts telling people that no, real people are actually fighting this stupid war for us. What do we do? And causes a stir over there, and it becomes problematic for people, including her friend, who's just telling her to stop. But she's also getting it from the Spearhead Squadron herself, and they start criticizing her for being dumb and, just ignoring the reality that she's dealing with. So you get that sense of that there too. So the first half of the show is about them confronting all the feelings of this bloodless war that's going on, but in reality, it's not bloodless. The second half of the show, once things go in a different direction, it's about what happens when war is done, and whether it was through pity or charity or some other inclination, a neighboring country sympathetic to their cause gives them asylum and says, this is a life that you could choose for yourself without having to fight. We can, once the war is done, what are you going to do with your life? Do you go to school? Do you learn a trade? Do you just have fun at a home? And you get some scenes there where they have fun at like Christmas time and holiday shopping sprees and just some other stuff that every character that's survived to that point does. But there's always that sense that these characters are coming back to fight, that they want to fight, so they do. And I think the show is good at giving these characters motivations that aren't just, hey, I fight for the sake of fighting. At least enough that you understand that there is a reality on all sides, that everything matters to a reason. But then, what if you do survive the problems? What if you are somebody that has no more fighting left to do? Do you keep on fighting? Some of them do. They go back into the fray and try to protect what world they have, but they also like, well, what do I do as a veteran? What do I do once all this is done? So they give you a second look at the characters and what they want to do with their lives, because the focus shifts less from the handler and the fighter's perspective into more of these people as people once the fighting is done. And that is important, because as good as the fighting sequences are, I think the half mech, half tank vibe is just kind of there. I mean, it's exciting battles, sure, but I always need something. I always need a character that I can root for, and thankfully, a lot of these characters are good that I can root for, especially Elaina and The Undertaker. They don't come across as goofy or aloof or annoying in any sense of the imagination. They give themselves time, and you want to succeed. I think the extras in the Spearhead Squadron are enough, but they're just kind of one note. They're not really the main characters. But later on, once you see who survives it and what they're going through, like some of them are like, hey, I just want to be with Shin because I have I have the hots for him or whatever, and that's all her character is. Other people are like, hey, I'm your friend, and I think what you're doing is killing yourself, burning the candle at both ends and whatever. But you get more of it. Because as I stated before, I think a lot of the fighting is done one-sided. They're just there to fight a dude, and they're not even fighting dudes. They're just fighting more harder enemies, and it just kind of gets like a one-sided drama. I'm always fascinated by shows that give you more to work with. As I stated before, just the idea that I'm not fighting some nameless, faceless drone. I'm fighting somebody who has a family on the other side, or who is trying to get something out of all this whole resource bullshit, or somebody who had a tragedy and is fighting to spite someone or to validate that. You don't really get that. You get that from the Spearhead Squadron and from Elaina. That's all you really get. So if that's something that's not up to your interest, that's fine. I think the fighting sequences are good enough, or if you like the military strategy stuff, that's cool too. But bear that in mind if you're looking for something a little more character driven and you need another side of it. But it is a drama. It is a heavy drama, and I do think I enjoyed it quite a bit. There's a lot that's going for it. Again, I do think it does kind of drag on a little bit with the fighting against a nameless foe, and it's just more of them. But I believe that by and large, the two main leads are what are going to carry this show to whether you like it or not. So would I recommend 86? I definitely would. It gave me a little bit of a war vibe and a fighty vibe and a mech show vibe without really being a mech show or a war show vibe completely. it was more about two main leads doing different things and feeling different things about the war, showing different sides and how their actions impact everyone else. So I got a lot out of it, and I think you guys would too. But that'll do it for me as my Discord goes off out of nowhere. But let's see what's on the docket going forward. Sonic 2, Radiant Historia, Arte, The Wandering Witch, The Journey of Elaina, or Elaina. I always go Elaina for some reason. Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, the Megumin explosion spin-off of Konosuba. I can't wait for season 3. I really, really want that. And then Sea of Stars. But that'll do for me, and I'll see you guys next time. Citizen Strife, signing off.